recording. All right, guys, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. It's Nikayla here for our last day of the Side Hustle Pro Bootcamp. And today we are zeroing in on podcasting as a side hustle and how to really make your podcast a side hustle. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Good afternoon. Yes, I see you guys in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get into my presentation, sharing with you a little bit about my own journey and then also the journey of my students inside of Podcast Moguls, what works right now with podcasting and how to make that your side hustle. So let me know if you see my screen. Let me know, give me a thumbs up if you see the slides for how to make podcasting your side hustle. All right, cool. Thank you for the thumbs up, Dee Dee and everyone else. All right, so let me minimize you guys and get right into it because I am going to get into Q&A. I hope if you had questions that you put it inside of the Facebook group, but even if not, we're going to open up the group chat for our final day and make sure everyone gets their question answered. So how to make podcasting your side hustle with no prior experience. I want to make sure everyone remembers that you don't have to have a background in audio. You don't need to be super techie or anything like that, or have a certain kind of voice, nothing like that to be a podcaster. I know that because that's what I've experienced myself. So 7 years ago, I was graduating with my MBA, but no job from the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. I didn't know what I was going to do next, honestly. So I was moving back to DC to live with my boyfriend, now husband, with no income. I just knew that I love social media and I wanted to find a way to match my interests with wherever I was going to be working next. So I got back, and while I'm trying to get a job, essentially, I was trying to figure out how to make myself attractive and something, how to develop a portfolio so that employers could see that I was marketing savvy and want to hire me. So I started up my blog, which I had completely ignored while I was in grad school, right? I began blogging again, and I started to think about building my personal brand. I wasn't really sure what that all entailed. So I did what many of you are doing, and I identified people who were ahead of me in the game who I wanted to emulate. So I started following online branding coaches like Amy Porterfield, Maya Elias, some of you might know from Build to Impact. And those were some of the first courses and trainings that I ever invested in. And let me tell you, I learned so much and was able to start really growing my personal brand. So back then, my site was called Kayla K Speaks, as I've mentioned. And I, on that site, started out very broad. And that's okay. If you start out broad, sometimes it takes a few iterations to narrow down what you want to talk about. Or sometimes you'll go narrow, then you need to widen it out just a little bit more. So through doing my own blog, I realized that I love sharing the stories of Black women side hustlers and entrepreneurs. I was gravitating to those stories at that time. And that is when the idea for my podcast, Side Hustle Pro, was born. I was obsessed with figuring out how to go from side hustle to entrepreneurship. I was obsessed with hearing more stories from people who look like me, who were in the corporate world or, just had a full-time job and who weren't interested in just jumping out into entrepreneurship without any kind of safety net, because I like to have money. I like to not feel stressed about money. I don't know. Let me know if I'm alone in that, but I did not want to just jump out there. So I needed to, where were those stories at? So I didn't see it, and I decided to create it myself. Important thing to note here, there were other side hustle podcasts, okay? So you can create a podcast that has a topic that's already out there. Now, you don't want to duplicate the name, of course, because you want to stand out. So, I did a play on the words. So I wanted to really keep side hustle in there to grab my perfect listeners' attention, my ideal listeners' attention, but I did a spin on what was currently out there. So there's a lane for you, even within popular topics. Don't get intimidated by that. So by that point, while I had started my podcast, I had actually started a job. So I started a job December 2015, and then I started the podcast in 2016, June. Now, guess where I ended up getting a job? I ended up getting a full-time job at NPR, which, funny enough, I didn't really listen to that much NPR growing up. So I was really like still feeling my way around. And then I started learning about this whole world of podcasting while I was there. So I was hired to lead the digital marketing, aka their social media marketing, brand presence for top podcasts like How I Built This, Code Switch, and many more. So I was doing that in conjunction with doing things like this brand photo shoot, which I did on a Saturday. I remember, and building out my brand. So I would use my after work hours, my morning hours, mainly after work though, because I'm not a morning person, and my weekends to build Side Hustle Pro. So I started at the same time studying how to make money through podcasting. Anything you do, anytime you are looking at how to make money, I want you guys to know that when you get into an advanced level, you do have to start to invest to make more money, right? There's nobody who makes money out there who didn't have to invest in themselves at some level. So it's up to you to decide, when you're ready to do that and when you're equipped to do that. But at that time, because I'd gotten a full-time job and I had some savings and was getting my financial stability together, I decided to invest $1,197 in a 2-day event sponsorship intensive. So the reason why I went to this, even though it wasn't podcast specific, it was about people who wanted to host live events and get sponsorship for that. I had no desire at that time to do a live event, but I wanted to know how to connect with brands. I'd never done that on my own. So from that intensive, I then started to apply the skills and the tips to podcasting, started testing it out on my own. What works? What kind of email subject headlines get attention? It's going to be different in the world of podcasting. Or what do they need to know about my podcast in order to reply back to my email? I started testing all of that out. And 6 months after launching my podcast, I pitched my very first sponsor cold, meaning I didn't know anyone at the company. I did not even know an email. I started out with the info at address, and they ended up moving it up within their organization to the right person because it was such an effective email. Again, testing has helped me to get more responses to sponsorship pitches. So from that cold pitch, I earned my first $4,000 in podcast sponsorship contract. And so $4,000, that's like a whole paycheck, like that is some substantial money that can cover rent, that can cover all this other stuff, So I started to say, all right, like if I keep doing this could eventually replace my full-time job, but I have to be strategic. Like I need to have consistent revenue coming in. So I started to do that more and more and more. And then in 2017, I was finally able to quit my job to podcast full time. This is the status update I put up. You can scroll back on Side Hustle Pro page to see this life update. Quit my job, gonna be a full-time podcaster. I know y'all don't know what that is, but that's gonna be my new job. I hired myself. That's how I really should have said it. Like, quitting has such a bad connotation. But anyway, so then here I am in 2022. I was inducted, Side Hustle Pro was inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame. Crazy. It's really, really crazy and surreal when you look at it, but it's something that is very, 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 very achievable, you guys, as an independent podcaster. I went from graduating with no job, no money, and podcasting took me to the Podcast Hall of Fame through consistency, through learning, growing, applying what I was learning, investing when I needed to learn a new skill, to grow my business, applying that, growing some more, earning some more money, and repeat. So I'm very, very passionate about giving you guys the keys to launch your own podcast, to grow your own podcast so that you can reap the benefits of this powerful platform. So I'm going to be sharing the top 3 tips to just get you started. Like you can walk away from this and you can really, really make an impact. One of the lessons you will look familiar to you guys because we've already touched on this as it is applicable for all side hustlers, right? So let me know in the chat how many of you have a podcast or are starting a podcast. Let me know by writing have a podcast or starting a podcast. That'll be really, really helpful to know before I get into step 1. starting. Okay, have a podcast. Feel free to drop the name of your podcast, you guys. This is about networking as well. Tell us the name, what it's about. I'd love to know that as well, because that helps me to be more tailored in my recommendations for you. So let's go ahead and jump into step one, though. And again, we'll have Q&A, and we're going to open up the group chat at the end, celebrate the last day of the boot camp, and make sure you guys really end off on a strong note. So step one, first, you really have to go into this by setting up your podcast goals. A lot of people start podcasts on a whim. Like you and your best friend are sitting around one day, or you're listening to a podcast and you're like, I could do that. So you grab a mic and you just start, right? And I want to applaud you for doing that, because at least you didn't have analysis paralysis, right? At least you got going. But you have to take a step back and really decide, what are your goals? Because if you don't know what you're working towards and you're not working towards anything, how can you hit milestones? How can you truly grow? So for me, it always starts with, what's my why? I wanted to hear these stories. That was the first thing. I also wanted to network. Low key, I really wanted a reason to speak to these people without having to say, hey, can I pick your brain? Because I know nobody wants to hear that. Nobody, is trying to just talk for no reason. So when you're like, hey, I have this podcast, people are more receptive. But then also, I really felt it was important for these stories to be centered and highlighted. And I did not see that on a consistent basis from any other show. So then I really reminded myself that done is better than perfect. Actually, before I started, I heard that on a podcast. My girl Sakita Holly from the Hashtags and Stilettos podcast, she talks about how she just started with her her Apple earbuds. And I was like, I can do this. Done is better than perfect. And so I want to remind y'all of that too. I had a $25 mic. I started in my living room. I set up my laptop, my mic in my living room on, the island for the kitchen, because I was in an apartment. And I just kept going from there. But one thing I did, and one thing you need to do, is set a long-term goal. So that's, again, where the whole idea of if you don't have milestones, how can you grow? How can you check in? So your goal when you start podcasting, when you start any side hustle, it should be, I am going to do this for at least a year. At least, before I reevaluate if I want to quit, if I want to stop, all of that. I'm going to do this for at least a year. So that's your starting goal. So now that you have a goal, you have something to strive for. And remember that you are now going to tell a story that no one else can tell, okay? No matter what the topic is, you might think, oh, people have heard this before, but have they heard it from someone who experienced XYZ, right? Like, how you've heard about side hustling, but have you heard it from someone who wants to know how to use side hustle and start a viable business? Not just Uber on the side, not just all these little side hobby jobs, but how do you really build out something for real on the side that can turn into a profitable business? That's what I wanted to talk about. So for you, what is it that you're telling? What's your story that no one else can tell? So I see things like Foxtrot Whiskey Bravo. All right. Yes, we definitely need a better name, Beth. I'm gonna keep it real with you. Breaking the Mask of Depression. All right. Black Diva Daily, Just One Question, Intellectual Beats. So we're going to talk about naming, Connect with Candy. We're going to talk about all of these things. So when you're thinking about your podcast, ask yourself, am I telling a story that no one else can tell? I know I can, because no one else has lived in my life and walked in my shoes. So how am I making sure my audience knows the story that only I can tell? And you do that by starting with your secret sauce. So you know how I started off our talk today and I talked about some of the things that I experienced? Like, that's my secret sauce. My secret sauce starts with the things that I was ashamed of. It doesn't have to start that way for you, but I tell that because there's so many people who, when we have a down moment in life, we hide, we retreat until we're successful again, and then we pop out with the success. But I want you to be reminded that this all came from a low moment in my life. I was ashamed that I didn't have a job after spending, upwards of thousands of dollars on a grad school degree. Like, that was not supposed to happen. That's not what you go to grad school for. So for me, I actually hid that from a lot of my peers. I didn't tell them I didn't have a job. I kind of acted like I did, but I didn't. And I was going going home broke after school. Okay. So your secret sauce, you have to share what you've experienced and how you thought and what makes you do the things you do, because someone else will relate to that. Someone else will gravitate to you because of your secret sauce. So step 2, after you've done that part, now you have to narrow down your podcast topic. I saw some of your titles in the chat, and yes, they are broad, most of them, and I can't necessarily tell what your topic is from most of them. And now, not every topic and not every podcast name needs to be literal. I can tell you that it helps a whole lot with marketing when you have at least some word about your what your podcast is about in your title, but it's not a deal breaker. It's not a deal breaker, but you have to really be strategic. So it starts with narrowing down your podcast topic. You may be wondering, like, okay, how do I go about selecting my topic? I want to talk about this and I want to talk about that. Well, step 1 is you really need to think through some questions. And let me know if I'm going too fast, you guys, because I want to make sure we get to Q&A. So I'm going to pause for a second. And maybe today, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A tab so that I can, when I do get to questions, just look and see all the questions in one place. So maybe let's do that today. So step 1, thinking through questions. All right. So what would I talk about if I were not making any money, right? It goes back to what we've been talking about with the Side Hustle Bootcamp. What are you passionate about? What do you have a strong opinion on? You definitely have to not be ambivalent to start a podcast. You definitely have to want to talk about this thing over and over again, or that realm of topic over and over again. What do you have unanswered questions about? What's your expertise? With this expertise piece, don't get too hung up on what you're traditionally taught that an expert is. So with a podcast, you are the conduit. You are helping your audience to get information, to get knowledge, to unpack situations in society, whether it's lighthearted or serious. And your expertise could be that you are willing to, ask the dumb questions. You are willing to ask what people want to know. You're willing to put yourself out there. So think about expertise more in that way, your level of vulnerability, your level of openness. And then, yeah, if you do have something that you are super, super comfortable talking about, put that in this answer as well. What do people always ask your advice about? Who do you want to impact? That's a big one, right? Like, who do you want to impact? And as you're thinking about this, because we've been talking this week with Jasmine, who wants to impact high-risk youth and young adults, think about how you'll get that message to who you want to impact. So a lot of times, especially when we're adults, if we want to reach youth, we have to talk to the parents. Honestly, a lot of you guys who start these podcasts for children, the audience is not going to be the child. Like, they might not be scrolling and say, hey, let me learn how to, stop being at risk. So really understand the communication pipeline to your audience, your core person who you want to impact. And then, what do you want to be known for? What do you want to leave on this earth? Some of you might have seen on the Angie Martinez podcast recently, Angie Martinez in real life, she interviewed Lauren London, and she said this powerful thing. She said, I just don't want to miss my mark. And I think ultimately that's what all of us are striving for, right? We know we're on earth for some reason, and you just don't want to miss that. And so that's what I mean by, what do you want to be known for? I don't want to miss emptying my tank, giving everything that I know based on the experiences that I have in life, sharing that and helping somebody else do what I've done, if that's what they want to do as well. That's part of the mark I don't want to miss. So think about that for yourself. And then start writing down a list of topics that could stem from that. So as I did when I started my blog, I knew that, okay, I am an expert in social media marketing. Perhaps I can blog about that, right? Because my podcast started as a blog. So I dabbled in that. I dabbled in dissecting marketing trends because I wanted to get a job. And then I also was interested in side hustling. So I dabbled in that as well and started interviewing some of the homies and, putting those interviews on the blog. And then through that process, of doing that, I started to narrow down what I want to do. But it started with a list of topics, right? Then narrowing it down to 1 to 3 ideas. If you have a really broad list of topics, you got to narrow it down to just 1 to 3. All right. So guys, remember to go into the Q&A section if possible. So to put your questions. All right. So step 2 within that is conducting the market research. What is market research? I know a lot of you know this phrase. I hope it's not too jargony, but market research is just essentially Googling who's out there, what are they doing, what's working, what's not working, what's missing, what do you like that they're doing, what's being done really well, and what's not. So, identify 5 to 10 other podcasts that talk about your topics. So again, I could easily put in Side Hustle. You can as well. And you'll see so many shows come up. And if you give them a listen, they're all taking a different angle. I was, again, looking. Not only was I not seeing a lot of interviews with Black women, but I wasn't seeing a lot of interviews with people who were truly, truly interested in building out one business, not just having many little side hustles or, hobby type of side hustles, like who were building out their business. So I started to see, not only do people have a different definition. Oh, Q&A is not enabled. My bad, you guys. So just drop them in the chat and we'll unmute anyway, so you'll get to ask. Identify 5 to 10 other podcasts that talk about your topics, and you'll start to see what's missing. So for me, again, I started to have that aha moment of, hey, people are defining side hustling differently. I have a chance to redefine it, to find it in my own language and really make my mark here. So that's exactly what I wrote down. I wrote down what themes are covered in the different episodes. I, decided, let me check out more episodes. What are they not talking about? And then I started to map out what I would cover that they don't. So then I also put down, what can you talk about that no one else can? So what can I talk about that no one else can? I think I've been a certified side hustler all my life. So I definitely had that lens, in addition to sharing my background of feeling like when you're unemployed, especially, like your focus is just on getting a job, or getting, I should say, income to pay for your life necessities, right? So I know I have that perspective of knowing that I truly want this to be a side hustle. This is not like me trying to jump right into entrepreneurship. So that is a perspective I wanted to bring to my podcast. So think through that. What can you talk about that no one else can? Why are you the perfect person to tackle this subject, this platform, and make sure that people understand this topic? So then after you do that, step 4 is going to be to evaluate if your topic is what I call a hit topic. Did you know there's actually a way to give yourself a better chance of having a hit topic and a hit podcast? You just have to evaluate it under this rubric. So HIT actually is an acronym I created that stands for has an audience, interesting and intentional, and tackles new ground. So has an audience, meaning, again, it is okay if other people are talking about this topic. If people are not talking about this topic, that's when you should be concerned, because there may not be an audience for that. Okay, so you actually want to see interest in the topic. You want to see an audience is already there. 1, interesting and intentional. You don't want your podcast to be boring, okay? And you as you're developing your content, you have to ask yourself, would I listen to this? Is this funny, or is this interesting? Is this entertaining? Is this insightful? Is this educational? You have to be honest with yourself about that. Now, I don't mean be hypercritical. We're not talking about your voice here. Okay. A lot of people hate their voice. I won't say everyone. So it's more so really make sure you're making a good show. Your content is the most important piece before you start trying to monetize and all this stuff. Knowing who you're talking to, then having really, really solid content. And intentional meaning you're not just saying, oh, I have to record today, and quickly getting on the mic and babbling a little bit and trying to slap it together and put it out just so you can say that you met your weekly publishing deadline. No, you've thought this through. You've outline the episode. You know what you're going to talk about. You know what topics you're going to touch on. If you're having a guest, you've reached out to them, you've planned this interview, you've prepped them so that it is as impactful and educational for your audience as possible. And then finally, tackles new ground. So although your podcast has an audience, again, we're looking for what's missing. So the people that are interested in side hustling and have never heard about this particular aspect of it, or want to finally hear more about this particular aspect because they haven't been hearing about that, they are going to gravitate to your show when they search for side hustle in their podcast apps or even across Google, and it starts to come up. They are going to gravitate to this show that tackles new ground. And the way you let them know that it's tackling new ground are things like your title, your show descriptions, your episode titles, all of that. All right. But that's how you evaluate if it's a hit topic. So knowing that, let me know how many of you think you have a hit topic in the chat. Let me know how many of you have a hit topic. Oh, thank you, Lion Flood, for that. Yes, guys, put a Q in front of your comment. Love that, to let me know that it is a question, not just a comment. All right. But I'm curious to know how many of y'all have, Keshna, you say maybe. If it's a maybe, that might be a no. So you got to evaluate that for yourself. Step 5, then evaluate the longevity of your topic. So not only do you want a hit topic, but you want a topic that you can talk about forever. I don't think any of you should be starting a podcast that has a end date, right? This is a podcast that you want to make sure that you can continue to build upon, have more and more episodes upon. So how can you decide this? Well, think about, will you be able to produce multiple episodes about the same topic? If this were a TV show, how many seasons would it have? And so forth. That's how you start to evaluate that. Like, so how many of you have thought through the longevity of your topic? You know, how many of you can say for sure that this is something that I can talk about forever? Keshner says, I like the idea of friendships through parenthood, but not sure if it's catchy enough. I will say that it is not clear what you mean by that, but it will, at least you have a buzzword in it, which is parenthood. But then, yeah, what does that mean? And again, when we get really, really targeted with who our audience is, then we know that we're talking to this kind of parent or that kind of parent. So friendships for, you know, if we're talking in men versus women sense, friendships for men look different than friendships for women, right? So you want to think through how you can make sure people know that your show is for them, and they will find their crew there, their people. There's a show, I love the title. I hope I don't mess it up. It's called like Good. I don't listen to the show, but I love the title. So I do need to still listen to the show, but so I'm not endorsing anything, y'all, because I have not listened to the show. However, I think the title is so catchy. It is, I think it's Good Moms, Bad Choices. And the reason why that is so iconic, right, is because you're getting the mom, you're getting the search engine optimization with the mom, but it's reaching out to, it's immediately letting those moms know who, you know, they feel like, I'm a good mom, but I'm not making the traditionally good choices that everyone talks about. Like, I'm not super organic. I don't make every meal from scratch. Like, if you're that type of mom who feels that self-consciousness about many areas of life, so you're going to zone into that. So that's what I mean by making sure your people know it's for them. So it doesn't have to be about race. It doesn't have to be about any particular thing, but you have to find a way to make, once you've identified who your people are, let them know this is the show for you. You get me? Beth says, I can talk about it forever with different episodes and seasons. Love that, love that, love that. All right. So now, check-in time. I want to know, is this helpful for you guys? I'm going to answer a few questions before we go on. So I'm going to scroll back and I'm going to go to the first cue that I see. Are there any cues yet? All right. Okay, yes, you're telling me that this is helpful for you. Cool beans, cool beans. I love this. And again, a lot of this is applicable to all side hustlers. Why? Because a lot of times we start these things and, we did not really think through who asked for this. Is it just me? I said, oh, this would be cool. Okay, well, who's the audience for this? We're going to go back over audience in a second because it's that important. But who asked for this and how is it going to stand out? How do I make sure it has longevity and it's not something people will get once and never want it again? Like, you never really want to start a business where people can buy it once and they'll never, ever have to come back to you, because then you have to continue to find new people. So these are questions that apply across side hustles. Thank you so much, Candy. She says, you're amazing with the information you offer. I really, really appreciate that. All right, we have one cue. Okay, question from Shalonda. Can you mix up and do some podcasts in person and video and some just audio, or should you stick to one format? Yes, you can mix it up. There are people who do that. I will say that I recommend just starting with audio when you start out, because most people try to do so much and then end up abandoning it all because they get too busy and they're like, oh, I don't have time to meet in person, or the day that the in-person episode is supposed to happen, you both have a conflict. I can't tell you how many times with my virtual interviews that just yesterday, me and the guest, we ended up both having an unforeseen hiccup. My son woke up with a fever, and I ended up not being in a good space to record that day. Now, if I had made an appointment at a studio, or was having someone come to my in-home studio to record, that would have been a mess. So I admire everyone who does an in-person podcast. That's great for them. But if it doesn't work for you, do not feel bad and don't try to rush it to work for you, okay? Because you can accomplish so much. Some of the wealthiest podcasters have an audio only podcast, okay? Because podcast, the medium is meant to be audio only. Do not pay attention to the hype that you're seeing right now. The audio only part is still very, very important for monetization in this industry. How do you pitch to a sponsor? We'll get into that. I will say about how do you pitch, Dee. How do you pitch is very extensive. So I go through this in Podcast Moguls, but it's not just about the email. Like I can't just say, oh, you send them this email. You have to have started your podcast. You have to know who your listener is. So we'll get into that in a second. But I just want to go through this target listener thing again, because it's so important, right? So you pitch to a sponsor. When you pitch to a sponsor, you're pitching your listeners. Did you guys know that? You're not pitching a sponsor your podcast. You're not saying, hey, sponsor Side Hustle Pro. It's this awesome podcast. We talk about entrepreneurship and side hustles to entrepreneurship. Yay. No, we're saying, hey, we have this many unique downloads. That means this many people tuned in this month. And these people, guess what? They're side hustlers. They're this gender. They are this age to this age. They have this level of education. They're probably interested in this, this, and this. And so that's why you want to get your message in front of them. You see what I mean? So this is why you need to know them front and back, that target listener. So we talked about this. Again, I'm going to just go through it really quick. All right. So your target listener is your ideal listener, your diehard fan, your podcast ambassador who will rave about your podcast to others. Majority of podcast listeners hear about a podcast from someone else. That's how I listened to my first podcast ever. I heard someone cracking up as we were walking, and she was just remembering a joke she'd heard on a podcast. And I was like, oh, what's that? Where do I listen to that? That's how your show is going to spread, okay? So it's more than their age. It's more than their occupation. They have goals, they have challenges, they have interests, they have dreams. And when you know who your target listener is, then you know what content to discuss on your podcast. So your content is their solution. And in the midst of their solution, you might provide other resources, AKA sponsorships. And sponsorships is only one monetization source, by the way, but your content is their solution. And within their solution, you may provide some other resources, sponsored resources that may help them. So we talked about this again. you're going to have to get on the phone, 5 to 10 people minimum, and you're going to get the deets. You should know their name, of course, but where do they work? Where do they want to work? What do they want to be when they grow up? Where do they live? What do they do after work and on the weekends? Where do they get their news? What other podcasts do they listen to? This is important for podcast listener research, especially. You only want to target people who listen to podcasts, okay? You don't want to be trying to do the work of getting someone who still uses a flip phone, who has the concern that your podcast addresses to listen to a podcast. You're not trying to convert people from analog to digital, okay? You're not going to do that. It's not the time for that. You're trying to find podcast listeners who have the concern or the interest that your show addresses, all right? So you want to make sure that you're understanding who these listeners are, who are already podcast listeners, who are going to be your listener. So again, you're just getting the tea as you have your conversation with them. What do they do? What do they do for fun? Who do they follow? And you're making note of those answers, and you're writing that profile of your target listeners. So you really understand, okay, who am I going after? Where are they hanging out online, and all of that. So remember that when you know your target listener, then you know what content to discuss on your podcast and where to find your listener on social media. All right. So next cue, let's take a question break. Lion Flood says, my content is directed at the Black man or lady that is sitting in their car at their job, contemplating on going in today, thinking to themselves, there has to be another way. All right. So you're talking to people who have some work fatigue, some day-to-day job fatigue. So that is something, that's a beginning, that's a starting point. So if you were to put a name on someone, obviously you can't put a name on a man and a woman. Now, remember that your ideal listener is the person who would be most receptive to your message. You still have a larger target audience within that. But then as you start to make your ideal listener profile, that's when you have to be super specific on them having a name. So it's no longer a man or lady. It's now Jennifer, who works at a pharmaceutical company, who, has been working for 5 years, feels overlooked, wants to find a way to, and so is your podcast about helping them grow in their career or helping them side hustle, entrepreneurs, or what is it about? So it'll be like, Jennifer, a pharmaceutical company, feels stuck, wants to do X. So you get more specific that way. You get it? All right, so I hate when this chat box goes away. Hold on, you guys, before we get into that. I have lost the chat again. Everybody, I have lost the chat. Oh, here we go. Question. Do you recommend outsourcing someone to edit your podcast? If you have the budget for it, I do recommend that, because it frees up space for you to then focus on your content, focus on producing more batch recording episodes. Now, if you're the kind of person that loves editing, then, don't take that off your plate right away, but figure out what those batch days are going to look like for you, those batch work days, what days are recording, what days are editing, so that you don't become your own bottleneck where your show doesn't go out on time because it takes you 12 hours to edit versus an editor who might be able to get it back to you way quicker. Or, it might take you 3 days to edit and an editor can get it back to you in 24 to 48 hours. Question, do you find the chat box? How do you find the chat box if you lose it? I just kept hovering over this top of the screen. For a starting podcast, do you think solo versus interview style is better? It all depends on the topic. I do not, none of that stuff actually matters. It really depends on the topic. And if I found a lot of solo people kind of start to fall off more, I don't know if you get bored or you run out of talking or you feel like you're talking to yourself or what, but within my small sample size, I have seen that solo episodes, those podcasts can be harder because it's just you. It's just you. And sometimes when you vibe off of a guest, you have more interesting topics and more interesting conversations, I should say. So co-hosted podcasts or interview podcasts can free up some of the pressure in that way. But then there are cons as well, because then you're depending on another person who may cancel, right? So your schedule, you have to really plan ahead. So if in case someone else cancels, you still have an episode for the week that you plan to have them. And with a co-host, sometimes people start out in earnest together, like, yeah, we're going to do this. And then, sometimes life gets hectic for someone, or they have a different vision and they have to go a separate way. So I think of podcast co-hosting like a marriage. Y'all really have to grow together, move together, and be able to accommodate life's shifts and still move together in that direction. Dee Dee, you say, I outsource because I'm clueless. So I started out doing very simple editing. I would essentially just put together the intro, some music, put the interview in the middle, add in some more music and an outro, and blend that all together inside of GarageBand. And I show you that basic tutorial inside of Podcast Moguls, because again, I want you to know that you do not have to be this audio engineer background who studied that in college. I certainly did not. I learned, and through trial and error, was able to do it myself for quite a while until my editor ended up pitching me. And by then I had started pitching sponsorships, so I had the money to pay for that. Because even though this is a side hustle, and even though you are investing some of your main salary into it, like you're your first investor, and so you need to invest your own funds into it, it doesn't mean you have to invest all your funds, right? You still have to be very strategic about, okay, what can I do for myself for now? What can I pay for? And then it gives you something to strive for. Like, I want to make at least X a month so I could cover the cost of this. You got me? All right. So I want to talk a little bit about Podcast Moguls, because I feel that it can really, really help a lot of people. So in starting this bootcamp, I was surprised because I wanted to talk to all side hustlers. And, I was pleasantly surprised by how many of you guys, and again, that just goes to show, like, when you keep showing up in the world and telling people what you know, what you do, people will know you for that. So in doing that, a lot of you who know what I've done with podcasting gravitated to this boot camp. So thank you for that. So I gathered from what you've told me, like, you guys are in a few different boats, right? So right now, some of you feel scattered. You want to launch and you want to grow your podcast, but your strategy feels all over the place. Or you feel stuck because you're busy, and the lack of this proven blueprint, like, here's what I do first, here's what I do next, is holding you back. And I know at the same time that you're kind of determined. You're here, and many of you have showed up every day this week. Thank you for that. I do not take it for granted. So I know that you're determined. You know the value of having a powerful platform like a regular podcast, and you are ready to do what it takes to grow it. So I am ready to do what it takes to help you grow it. So option one, you can keep trying to DIY your podcast with tips gathered all over social media and all over YouTube, and, try to put it together yourself. Or you can decide to make podcasting a priority and use my proven roadmap that tells you exactly where to start and what steps to take. So that's why I invite all of you guys to join me inside of Podcast Moguls. Let me share a little bit about what it entails. So first of all, it's an accelerator program, meaning it's meant to help you move faster. Podcasting is already a very populous industry right now. It's a hot space to be in right now. And when you're starting out, you are starting from zero. So this is meant to help you move faster by teaching you my proven effective marketing strategies, for you guys who want to increase your downloads, right? You want to grow your podcast audience and you want to monetize this podcast. So monetization, it's something that can definitely happen months into podcasting, but you have to move fast. If you want to get that monetization to happen, you have to move fast to grow your audience. You have to move consistently to keep putting out content month over month. And one thing I'll also say is, I'll take courses sometimes, like when I'm working on different areas of my business. Right now, I'm working on the email area of my business, email marketing. And again, I share things that apply to podcasting when, I've learned it and I've got it. So, excuse me. One of the key things about any kind of content marketing or email marketing is email marketing starts with content marketing. And so the people that have consistent content that's going out every week, you already have an advantage. Whatever you want to do in life, you have content. You can put your own ads against your content. So some of you guys, you want to know about making money. You can make money for another business that you have with a podcast. Okay. You can put your own ads within your own podcast. So this is like this content platform that can be leveraged in so many ways. But you got to set it up correctly so that you really are talking to a core person. So within Podcast Moguls, I focus on 5 main areas. So launching your podcast, attracting subscribers on day 1, monetizing your platform and making income from your show, marketing your podcast, right? How to market your show, how to climb the charts. It's not just social media. We touch on social media marketing, Instagram, Facebook, even ads, but then I also share email marketing strategies because the primary, most effective tool you'll have is actually your email list. So social media, likes and followers, it's all vanity metrics and it's helpful. Don't get me wrong. It's helpful when you have your media kit and you're able to say, I have X amount of followers, but you'll get more response for clicks on things you want people to click on when you're able to email them, when you're able to remind them via email, hey, come to this thing. Hey, do this thing. Hey, I have this thing for sale. So we're talking about marketing. Okay. That's a core part of the program. We're talking about personal brand building. And then we're talking about increasing those downloads week after week. So a lot of you guys, when you launch with that bang, you go in there with all this excitement. And then each week, do you go after each week the way you do when you first launched? I bet you don't. And I'm here to be your coach and remind you that you have to keep that same energy. You cannot, once you have a podcast, think, oh, okay, I have X amount of subscribers, so every week they're going to listen, right? No. Every week, everyone is thinking about their own problems and their own struggles. You have to remind them, hey, I have this episode out. And then they'll have to say, oh, I'm interested in that. Let me go and listen. Okay. Like even my favorite podcast, sometimes I'll come across a tweet and I'm like, oh, they have that person on today. I didn't even know. I didn't open up my podcast app yet today. So I know in my head, I want to go back and listen to that. So this morning, as I was getting ready, I was listening to the latest Getting Grown episode. I was excited to see that they had policy and fashion on, right? So that is how podcasting works. You have to keep that same energy weekly. And that's what I coach you on. So inside of Podcast Moguls, you'll learn what equipment to use. You'll learn how to get set up, how to post your podcast to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. You'll learn how to develop your podcast process. So you guys, I have a process, okay? I have a process from how I reach out to guests to what happens when the episode is finally published and how it's promoted. I teach you that process so that you get that inside of your blood and that starts to become second nature to you guys. All right. I teach you how to record and edit. I do a super user-friendly walkthrough. Like I said, editing does not have to be this whole complex thing. The great thing about podcasting is people expect it to be very straightforward. They're not expecting all these musical interludes and transitions. You might be, because you're putting that pressure on yourself, but your audience is not. I'll teach you how to refine your podcast topic and position your show for launch. A lot of podcast moguls come in and ended up rebranding or tweaking their show a little bit after going through that lesson. And then, of course, I teach you how to pitch and land any guest for your show. and how to market your show, grow your email list, how to market your show using Instagram, Facebook, IG, all of that. We'll be updating it to include TikTok at some point this fall. And then I teach you how to position your show for monetization. And of course, Didi, how to pitch sponsors, including emails and swipe files that work. So I give you my exact media kits, my exact emails that I send out. And again, as I grow and new things work, because things are always shifting, I do update the program. And as a matter of fact, I'm getting ready. I'm just looking at the calendar here. So I'm going to start doing the countdown because Podcast Moguls 2.0 is coming, and the price will be going up, you guys. The price will be going up, and I want to make sure everyone can get it at this price who wants it at this price, but the price will be going up, and no one will be able to say I didn't give you plenty of notice because I'm going to be doing that countdown. So inside of Podcast Moguls, in addition to the actual course, which goes over everything that I just shared with you, you're also getting the community. So just like you've had the community here, and I'm active in that community, right? So you have comments inside of our community. I'm here to comment as well, comment back. That is what we have. So it's going to be separate from the Bootcamp community. Podcast Moguls, you go in there and you can talk to fellow moguls. You can get feedback. You can share your wins. Like you see Felicia of the Trill MBA podcast shared here. She shared when her podcast went to number 53 in iTunes careers, and it's now called Apple Podcasts, but at the time iTunes. And yeah, she just said, what God does for one, he does for the others. Keep grinding. We got this. And thanks, Nikayla. And that's what I'm here to do. Like, help us get these wins. We also meet monthly for video group coaching. So the monthly cadence is every third Wednesday we meet, and you have live coaching calls. It's similar to what we do here, except there are no slides. It's just a strict Q&A. All of you guys can unmute anytime you want, and you bring all your challenges, the questions that you've had this month. I find that the monthly cadence works really well because when it's weekly, things happen. You don't have time to even work on anything or see any improvement between the last time we chatted. So there's no question. So you need to have time and space to do things and then come to me with your questions or your feedback or your challenges. So you do receive live coaching from me inside of Podcast Moguls each and every month. And so this was actually a special lesson that we had with my editor, Chris. So like I said, I am not your tech wizard. Okay, I can get it done, but that's all you need. You need the basics. You start with the basics, right? So he came in to answer some more specific questions inside of the Podcast Moguls community that day. And this lesson, or what should I say, this coaching call is still up. So when you join and you go into the editing section, you will see that. Okay. Talking so much today, so I had to drink my water. All right, so that's that. And just to recap a little bit, because I'm not going to understate all that I bring to this program, because I'm very, very proud of it. I'm very, very passionate about it. So inside of my Podcast Moguls, you do get the 8-module course plus the monthly live coaching sessions, which in and of itself is a $4,000 value, right? If you were to ask me for a live coaching sessions, and I cap it technically at 4, but you can come back and join a live coaching session anytime you want. But technically you've got 4 sessions, which by itself would be $1,000 a session. So that's where that $4,000 come from. I'm not like making that up out of nowhere. That's if I was offering one-on-one, I would charge that for 1 session. All right. Lifetime community access. I know people who charge $197 a month for their private communities, and then that's not even lifetime. Like this, you join once, you have access to us. You don't have to pay a monthly fee to be a part of it. And then you're also getting all of my sponsorship pitch letters and media kits by themselves. I had to go to a 2-day intensive to learn sponsorship, right? So that by itself, someone will charge you $1,197 just to learn sponsorship. But I'm teaching you that within Podcast Moguls for one rate. You're also getting my guest pitch templates. Again, I've seen this sold at $597 just to get some templates on how to pitch guests. Plus, you get the Master the Gram program. That program is a Instagram tailored program that by itself, if you go over to sidehustlepro.co/mastergram, it's a $297 value. Same thing with Goal Getter Action Plan. That is my productivity blueprint of how I do my 90-day sprint process when I'm side hustling so that I can get more done in a quarter of the year than I used to get done in a whole year. That is a quick breakdown of that, okay? It's a mini course. It's $98 by itself, but I include this because I want you guys to actually keep going with your podcast. So learn this process, and it's all inside of Podcast Mogul. So if you did the math on that, it's $8,553. Obviously, I'm not going to charge you that. This course by itself, when the price goes up, it will be $3,000. Currently, you can either make one payment of $997 or 4 monthly payments of $297. So that is the investment in yourself to join Podcast Moguls. The doors are now open, and they're open at this price for a short time. I am still working on some of the videos in Podcast Moguls 2.0. So until those are done, the current price will exist. You can head over to podcastmoguls.com/join. I will put that in the chat, podcastmoguls.com/join, so that you guys can come on down. Lion Flood says Steve Harvey was just talking about podcasting the other day and how fast it's growing. Listen, it's growing. And you know what's interesting about podcasting is because you'll see some of these major companies, they're investing in podcasting and then they're having to do layoffs because they're moving too fast without thinking through the elements that I teach inside of Podcast Moguls. They think, oh, if we build it, they will come. If we have Michelle Obama host a podcast, of course it's going to do amazing. What's the podcast about? Who is it for? Who is Michelle's target audience? You know, where are we meeting them? If we don't know that, then one episode she's interviewing Conan O'Brien. The next one she's interviewing someone else random. It's like, what is the goal of this show? It doesn't matter who you are. Your podcast will not succeed unless you truly understand this. So that's why I teach Podcast Moguls. You don't have to go and work for somebody and do podcasting to succeed. You don't have to be on a network. You can do podcasting on your own. I have done this for the last, 2022, 6 years. 6 years as an independent podcaster. This is my livelihood. I make money monthly, from sponsors, from teaching, from brand deals and partnerships, all because of podcasting. So if you would like me to be your coach, you want to go beyond, this is our last day together inside of the boot camp. I encourage you to come over to Podcast Moguls. I actually have some bonuses for you guys, by the way. And before I get into that, because I know some of you might be stuck on the price, like, let's be real. I'm not going to deny that for some, this might look like a high price. And I mean, this is actually, like I've been telling you, it's actually, and I've been told time and time again that it's actually less expensive than it needs to be. I've been told time and time again by my coach that I need to raise the price. And I know that I need to. That is one of the things that I love to do, is over deliver. I just want to make sure you guys have everything you need and you're not caught up on the price, but you are getting everything you need. You cannot leave the Podcast Moguls program and say you didn't get everything you needed. But when it comes to making a decision like this, one of the things that I always do is this equation of, would it be worth it if Podcast Moguls helped me do this? So for me, I wanted to elevate my brand. I wanted to land brand partnerships. So you can do that equation yourself and say, okay, do I want to do this? All right. Do I believe Podcast Moguls can help me do that? All right, then it's worth the investment. Within investing in the sponsorship intensive, $1,197. I said, would it be worth it if I was able to then start pitching sponsors and, start having success with that? Would it be worth it? Then yes, I'm going to do that. So that's the equation I use. And you can insert in anything that's important to you. Would it be worth it if Podcast Moguls help me do that? And then, go over to podcastmoguls.com/join. It fully goes over everything that's inside of the program. You can see testimonials. You have the option to pay in full, which there are some pay in full bonuses. So I'll go over that. But let me go over that really quickly, and let's do some Q&A, because I know some of you guys have to run. So you know what? I'll actually email you this. Tolu's story. She's a Podcast Moguls alum who went from coming in with just an idea to launching and then getting sponsorship from Google. Black Girls Wine. How amazing is that podcast name, right? Talk about targeting your audience. She's had amazing press coverage and sponsorships as a result. So some pay in full bonuses for you guys. If you would like to join today, I'm going to give you those pitch emails. All right, Didi. So the exact email that I used to land that first $4,000 in sponsorship, I'm going to give you my 5-day branding blitz, which was my road to launch, so that I could come out the gate in, over here is on the left, top 10 in business, marketing, and on the right, number 37 in business, first week out the gate. So I'm giving you that. And then I'm also giving you my pitch email to Apple Podcasts that landed me this carousel placement in New and Noteworthy for my episode with Curlbox founder Malik Teal. Now, usually when you go into the podcast apps, the shows you're going to see there are on major networks. NPR, Spotify, all those other things. Those shows are what get these kind of placements. But I sent a pitch email. I love me a cold email, and got that placement. So I'll give you that as well if you pay in full. Plus, I'll give you my pitch email that landed me my first international speaking engagement. So I got flown out to speak in Barbados. So, me and hubby got a vacation at the same time as, I got to speak at this conference. So I'll tell you how you can leverage what you're doing with podcasting to start to get those kind of perks. All right. Establishing yourself as an expert, establishing yourself as an authority in a space, and being able to speak on stages. I'll show you exactly how I did that. So again, Power of Podcast Moguls. I'll email you guys. I want to get into some more Q&A. So I just want to let you know that the price for this will go away next Friday. Okay. Next Friday at noon. All right. So remember, when you pay today, you qualify for the fast action pay in full bonus. So please go ahead and do that. All right, I was just pulling up the questions from our Facebook group as well, so that I could see it in both places. All right. So let me go back over to Q&A, and I'm pulling up questions from Facebook as well. So guys, go ahead and put a Q next to your comment, so I know if it's a question. And I think Didi, I think you were the one who sent over many questions inside of Bootcamp, right? Bootcamp Facebook group. So let me go and pull those up right now. And thank you guys so much for joining. This has been a really, really, powerful week for me as well. And it just goes to show, I'm going to actually stop sharing. Make sure you guys jot that down, podcastmoguls.com/join. It's also inside of our chat. So you guys have that, and I'm going to go ahead and pin my video. Okay. Shayla, thank you so much. You're so welcome, you guys. Didi says, thank you for sharing your knowledge. You're sharing your time and knowledge, and thank you for spending this time with me. Shayla says, you're awesome. What a great week and insight you provided. Thank you. Thank you. And so the group will be up for, what I'm going to do. I'm going to have the replays up all weekend. So for some of you guys who missed it, you'll have until Sunday night. Okay. But then again, this is a challenge. This is a boot camp. So it's not meant to exist forever. It's meant to take action this week. So you'll be able to do that. And we'll have the group up again for a short time. We'll archive it for a bit until the next challenge. So make the most of the group. All right. And, make the most of the challenge. Okay. All right. So really quickly, I'm going to answer about 10 questions, and then we'll hop off. Okay. Again, come on over to podcastmoguls.com/join to continue to get this type of coaching from me about making your podcast your side hustle. So number one, how can you generate or market your podcast? Oh, excuse me. Let me make sure you guys can hear me. Number one, how can you generate or market your podcast once aired? So you say, I have 2 seasons, but not much traffic. I know I should market more on social media, but are there other ways I can position to get more listeners in the meta tags or title, etc.? So Desmarie, number one, marketing, it starts with your name. It starts with your overall positioning of your show. So your name, what are your episode titles? How are you letting people know it's for them? And then of course, who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? Do you know where they live online? So yes, you do need to use social media, and you could absolutely use social media to get them back on your email list. So every time you drop an episode, you email them and you let them know the episode is live so that they will listen. People do not just default listen to your show. You need to constantly be telling your audience what's on your show. So via clips on social, that's stuff that can be scheduled out in advance, batch process. You make audio snippets for your show. You can use tools like Headliner to do that and go from there. So make sure you know who you're talking to, and make sure you're being strategic with your show title, your episode titles, your show description, your episode description, and that you are consistently bringing the same energy you did for your launch to every single promotion of every single episode. Number 2, what's a good relaunch campaign if I have lost the swing of things and want to change the trajectory to more solo episodes? So a good relaunch is the 5-day branding blitz that I shared with you guys. I walk through exactly my 5-day process of launching my show. Number 3, so basically, and just to give you a preview of that, you want to get people excited. Like, this is coming, and every day you share a bit of what's coming. You let them know when it's coming, and when it's here, it's here. So you have to bring the excitement you want to see from people. And even if no one's raving in your comments and liking all your stuff, you have to be so excited. All right. Your excitement is infectious to other people. Number 3, if the episodes are not getting much, should I delete and repost like I would for Instagram? No, if the episodes are not getting much, there's a deeper issue there that you need to analyze. You need to analyze the content. You need to analyze the audience, and have you narrowed down enough who you're talking to? Have you refined your show and your topic and the name of your show to make it clear who you're talking to? Most of the time, the problem lies there. If your show is doing what it's supposed to be doing in what I've taught, you are going to have listeners. So there's a deeper problem that we need to unpack. And it's not about, oh, people are not listening. So don't delete the episodes, but let's fix the future episodes. Number 4, what are the best marketing ways to get known as a podcaster? All right, so that I kind of addressed in number 1. So you can't be known as a podcaster without having a really solid podcast, which has the ingredients that I mentioned above, okay? So positioning yourself is all about positioning the content, and we need to get that content being really, really solid. So we have to tighten up there. Elizabeth says, advice on finding a podcast producer, someone to edit the recording. Okay, so you don't like editing. So I would start with looking into Fiverr and Upwork. Have any good producer should provide you with a sample for free so you can assess their work and go from there. Look at reviews. Inside of Podcast Moguls, in our private community, people have suggested a few, but people change all the time. Their rates change. So it's really best to do your own search. And so you can start with that. And you can also search podcast producers. There are a lot of services these days that offer this, and they have different subscription levels. So start there. Number 2, how often should we upload episodes in the first 3 months? So go to launch with at least 3 episodes. And then after that, determine the cadence that works best realistically for your schedule. And then tell your audience what to expect. Once you tell your audience what to expect, that's all that matters. It's a relationship between you and your ideal listener. They know you're coming out with the episode twice a month. They're looking forward to that. But if you tell them that you're coming out with the episode every Wednesday and Sunday and you miss a day, you lose their trust. You don't want to do that. So start off slow if you need to, as long as you can actually stick to that date. So they know to look out for you on that date. And then finally, final question, you guys, how do we monetize podcasting besides doing ads? If we're doing ads, okay. So how do we monetize besides doing ads? So there are a couple of ways to monetize in podcasting. You can sell your own products and you can sell your own services within your podcast. So you can advertise what you have going on. You can also do the subscription model and offer, premium content to your subscribers via like Patreon or things like that. Do note that if you're struggling to attract an audience, getting an audience to then subscribe to your premium content is a hard lift. It's a hard thing to do. And it's more work on you. And then sometimes, let's say you have a $5 tier, you might be doing more work each month just for, $20, $40 until you really build up your reputation. So you have to be really thoughtful about what monetization strategy you want to do first. Okay. So having your podcast be like a resume and your business card that then upsells people into your overall business services is one route. Selling your own merch or products by advertising on your own show is another route. Of course, you have sponsorships, working with brand partners and having them pay you to sponsor on your own show is another route. So those are the top 3 routes. Of course, there are other things that can be done, live events and all this other stuff, but I'm going to stick with those core 3 as ones to start doing your research with. All right. So with that, you guys, again, head over to podcastmoguls.com to join, to get more coaching from me. The price of Podcast Moguls is going up. You will see reminders from me about this because I would hate for you to say I didn't tell you before it went up, but Podcast Moguls 2.0 is coming, and that is why the price is going up. All right. I'm going to be sharing with you my lessons on YouTube. I'm bringing my podcast to YouTube. I'll be sharing with you my lessons in the last 6 years of podcasting, and that will be all upgraded and relaunched as 2.0. If you purchase at this rate, you will always have access, even when I do upgrades. So don't worry about that. But then do make sure that you know that this is going away. All right. So thank you guys again for joining. And one last question. I will do this one last question. All right. Keshna, you say, Nikayla, I have clicked on everything on the internet to learn how to start my side hustle, and everything came with basic information such as just do it and then a sales pitch. With all that said, I just wanted to say thank you so much for actually giving us some valuable information this week. I've learned so much. You're so welcome, Keshna. Thank you. That's the perfect note to end on. I am so blessed that you guys chose to join me for the Side Hustle Bootcamp. This was an awesome experience for me, and I'm so glad it was an awesome experience for you. And with that, I will talk to you guys on email. Feel free to take advantage of the Bootcamp group for as long as it's up. And with that, have a great rest of your weekend. All right. Talk to you soon.